citizen.
Out of many
We are world citizens, same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome to another episode of the People Powered Planet podcast, where each week we bring amazing solutionaries. The world is filled with so many podcasts about the deep, deep problems of the world. We focus on people who've taken action, who are moving us toward becoming world citizens, rising above the nations that divide us, and seeking a broader solution for our planet as a whole. This is a very special week because Garry Davis, who inspired this whole program on the People-Powered Planet, Garry Davis, the subject of our movie, The World Is My Country, was so horrified by what he did, bombing people and destroying them in their homes and his own brother's death, that he felt he had to take action. He had to do something to stop the next war, especially when he saw nuclear war looming on the horizon. He said, what if I'm called back in the reserves to bomb Moscow in a war that could end life on Earth? I've got to do something. So on May 25th, in 1948, he walked into the U.S. Embassy and did something very startling. He walked into the U.S. Embassy, went to the consulate office, and he officially gave up his United States citizenship. And he did so, as he mentioned in articles at the time, for the love of his country, not because he hated America, but because he loved America and didn't want to see it destroyed. And so he gave up his citizenship and he declared himself a world citizen. Well, the consulate said, but there's no such thing. He says, well, there is now. Garry, by doing that, started an incredible movement, which you see in our film, of people all around the world declaring that they too were world citizens and that they too see themselves as rising above the nations that divide us and these petty wars. We have a very special guest, someone who knew Garry Davis and someone who, like Garry, was so horrified by war that he was also propelled on a journey, on an odyssey that also took him into giving up his U.S. citizenship and becoming a world citizen and joining with Garry there in Paris in some of those crucial years at the early stage of his adventure. Let me introduce a special guest to you, Will Reed. Now, Will Reed, as a young man who had been abandoned by his family, who was kicked out of high school because he was living on his own, ended up in a situation where he was forced to choose between going to Vietnam and going to jail. And he chose Vietnam, not quite realizing what was going to await him. But when he got there, he ended up observing, like Garry did, some of the many horrors that we're also aware of of the Vietnam War. The horrors that this was 1968, the bloodiest part of the Vietnam War, and he was just disgusted by the corruption and everything he saw. So he ended up in a series of adventures that brought him, expelled him, brought him back to the U.S., but he returned to Vietnam as a journalist. And this is where the story starts getting really interesting and has some parallels to Garry Davis. So tell us, Will, first of all, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit more about what happened when you returned to Vietnam as a journalist, there to expose some of the corruption and even war crimes that you had witnessed.
Well, when I got back to Saigon in early 1971, I was almost immediately arrested by the military police, who, by the way, had no authority to arrest me since I was a civilian. But they did nevertheless. They weren't very nice. They locked me up, punched me around a bit, kicked me a couple of times. Anyway, they eventually turned me over to the Vietnamese police, who put me in a jail in Saigon. The jail was not very nice, to say the least. It was rat infested, and if you want to call it food, we were given something they called food twice a day. Basically, it was fish heads in some watery broth and some dirty rice, normally used to feed pigs, but that's how it was. Anyway, one thing led to another. I sort of bluffed the consul who came to see me from time to time, and they eventually released me. And when I was released, I went to the American embassy in Saigon, and I asked that all of my belongings be returned. And when they said, "But Mr. Reed, we didn't arrest you, we don't have anything, we can give you a travel document so you can return to the United States," I kind of lost it. Fortunately, I didn't have a weapon on me. They did allow me to renounce my citizenship. And so I left, but then I also found out that they had asked the Vietnamese police to arrest me again. And that's when I was forced to flee Vietnam. And I did. I didn't want to get arrested again with who knows how much time I'd have to spend in another Vietnamese jail or prison. So anyway, I went overland through Cambodia and made it into Bangkok, Thailand, where I started my search for political asylum. And the Brits were kind enough to inform the Thai police that they had someone in the British embassy that shouldn't be there. So they had me wait all day long. And then finally they said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed, there's nothing we can do for you." They opened the door to let me out, and there's the Thai police waiting to arrest me. Nice. So I can't say anything more nice about the Brits. It's just, anyway. So I'm in the Thai immigration jail, which was a lot nicer than the Vietnamese jail because they had 2 very nice meals a day. But anyway, it was what it was. And so once this tourist accidentally discovered me, put up
Wait, before you get to tourist, how long were you in that Thai jail?
From the 15th of December, 1971, till the 4th of July, 1972, when I was, after having received my world citizen passport, I was finally allowed to be deported, and I was deported on the 4th of July and placed on an Aeroflot flight to New Delhi.
Before you get to that, wait, I interrupted you, but I do want to finish the story. So there you are, even though you're getting 2 meals a day, in this Thai prison for how many months was it?
Well, 6.5 months.
6.5 months, and somehow you got the attention of a passing tourist. How did you do that?
Well, I was just, in this jail cell. I mean, it's a jail, hardwood floors, but there's nothing. I mean, there's no television. There's absolutely nothing. And this tourist who was went to the immigration department seeking, I guess, an extension on her visa, and she somehow wandered into the jail section, and everybody starts telling me, "Oh, there's a woman who, she's Caucasian. Go talk to her." So I got up off the floor and went to the bars and holding the bars like that, and she's looking at me saying, "Well, what are you doing in here?" And I said, "Well, I've been charged with illegal entry and ordered to be deported, but I don't have a passport." And she says, "Oh, well, I happen to know about Garry Davis, and he issues these world citizen passports." And she gave me the information. So I wrote to Garry asking for a world citizen passport. I eventually got a world citizen passport. And once I had the passport, which was handed to me through the bars by the Swedish consul, and he says, you know, this is not really a very good passport. And I said, well, you know, any passport's better than no passport. So anyway, they did allow me to be deported on my world citizen passport.
So
To
tell
New
us the
Delhi.
steps in that. So there you are, you're in this prison, you've been issued this passport. How do you actually get out of the prison?
Once I had my world citizen passport, and they allow me to go to leave the immigration jail to go out to various embassies to get a visa. Nobody would give me a visa because nobody really wanted to accept or recognize this world citizen passport, except the Indian embassy that said, you know, when I went to the Indian embassy and said, uh, I need a visa to get out of jail, and the consulate officers looking through his papers and said, well, you don't need a visa. And I said, well, can you give me a piece of, a letter or something saying I don't need a visa? And so finally he said, okay, we'll give you a letter saying you don't need a visa. So I waited. They gave me this letter saying I didn't need a visa. And I went back to the immigration jail, showed it to the commanding officer of the immigration jail. And I said, you see, I don't need a visa to be deported and go to India. And he said, okay, fine. But now you need a ticket. and so there was this Canadian group that was opposed to the war in Vietnam, and they paid for my ticket, a one-way ticket from Bangkok to New Delhi in India.
How did you contact this Canadian group?
Well, they heard about me. This woman who discovered me in jail, she put up a notice in the hotel. I think the hotel was the Atlantis or Atlantic, something like that. Atlantis Hotel. And after that, I started getting visits. You know, people would bring me books, money, fruit. It was it was pretty nice. And so anyway,
What was the woman's name who found you?
unfortunately, I don't know. I wish I had. Well, I didn't have anything to write with, but I wish I had somehow managed to keep her name, because
Wow.
I'd definitely like to thank her, because thanks to her, I heard about Garry Davis and the World Citizen Passport, and eventually able to get the World Citizen Passport. And that's what allowed me to get out of jail after 6.5 months. So anyway, I get out of jail. I'm handcuffed. I'm taken to the airport. I'm put on this Aeroflot flight on the 4th of July and flown to New Delhi. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, the 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July, Independence Day.
Yeah. And so anyway, when I arrived in Delhi, the person at the immigration desk, he's looking all through his books and he can't find anything about world citizens. And he says, oh, okay, you don't have anything to pay. You're a world citizen. You can. He stamped my passport, and that was in India.
Bravo! Yay! What an amazing escape! And it was pretty incredible that this was the kind of thing that Garry was doing all over the world. He was getting letters from people, and he had an office there in Paris. He was issuing world passports, and so it's wonderful to have right here one of the many people whose lives he touched by those efforts. So continue continue with the story, because this is very, very fascinating. So there you are on an Aeroflot plane heading toward India. What were you feeling emotionally?
Oof. I was just so happy to be out of jail. I mean, I'd been in jail in Saigon for 7 months, and now another 6.5 months in Bangkok. So all told, I just spent a little over a year in jails, prison, and it was just so nice to be free. What else can I say? Now the only thing that I was really concerned about is I just wanted to get to a place called civilization, and civilization for me was Europe. So that's how I started my trek from New Delhi and ended up in France.
Now
I
tell
didn't
us
really.
about how you went from New Delhi to France, because that was the same journey Garry took. In Gary's story, the Prime Minister Nehru personally signed his papers to stay for 2 months in India, and then when the 2 months were up and he left, he also needed to get to Europe, and so he just began to walk from amazingly walk from India to Berlin, where he wanted to go and rebuild the cities his bombs had damaged. And he has an incredible adventure in his book called "My Country Is the World," which you can get afterwards and hear his adventure. So here you are in a parallel adventure. You're going from India to Europe. How did you do it?
Well, a lot of hitchhiking, and fortunately, I met this Australian man who was on his way to work on the oil rigs off the coast of Norway, and he had heard about me, and so he subsidized my travels with him because he was occasionally he would buy my bus ticket, and he bought food, and he's just a really nice guy. And his objective was,
You happen to remember his name, or
oh yeah, John Keyes.
John
Uh,
Keyes? Okay, so John
yeah,
Keyes is helping subsidize your journey, buying you bus tickets, and you're going along the same route he's going. He's just taking you along.
right,
Yes,
right.
okay.
We were traveling together uh, through Pakistan, through Afghanistan, through Iran, through Turkey. Now in Istanbul, Turkey, he wanted to go to Greece, and Greece wouldn't allow me in. They wouldn't give me an entry visa, a tourist visa, or anything. So I was obliged to go around through Bulgaria and eventually what was once Yugoslavia, which is now Serbia, and 7 different countries today. But at the time, it was Yugoslavia.
Right.
So
So
I
now
went. I went
at each of these borders, here you are traveling with a world passport. One country didn't let you in. What happened at each of the other borders as you were taking this journey on your world passport?
well, it was it was interesting. First of all, when we didn't have too much trouble getting into Pakistan, and even getting out of Pakistan into Afghanistan. Uh, so anyway, Afghanistan was
So
kind of
those places just stamped it, or just waved you
yeah,
through?
yeah. They did stamp my passport.
Mhm.
I'll tell you about Gary's reaction when he saw my world passport with these 14 stamps. Anyway, so uh, going from well, Iran was the toughest place because they didn't want to let us in, and finally, after negotiating for I don't know, well over an hour, they finally said, "Okay, we'll give you a 3-day transit visa to go from one end of Iran to the other." So we said, "Okay, well, that's good enough." So we we did our best to get all the way through Iran. It's actually a pretty big country, when you look at it, especially when you're going from the east to the west. So anyway, get to the Turkish border, and John went through easily, but then they didn't know what to do. They had never seen a world passport, so I was introduced to the chief of the immigration officer or whatever, and this guy. He's a giant. First of all, he must have been about 6'6" and 250 pounds. He could have qualified for the NFL, I'm sure. He's just you, and he's not smiling at all. He's looking at me like he's just getting ready to break me in half or something. And I'm showing him the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and and everything else. And finally, he gets up, comes around from his desk, and sticks out his hands, smiles, and says, "You're the first world citizen I've ever met. Glad to meet you." And he stamps my,
Wonderful, wonderful. So that's
and he
great. So
stamps,
he's skeptical, and then. So tell us, a key part of that was showing them the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. How did you get that Universal Declaration?
well, I got it when I got my passport.
Yes, Gary sends it out with every passport.
Everyone has the right to leave their country and return, basically. So I just, I just told him that I was on the way home. Fortunately, John was waiting for me, and he was just about ready to leave when they stamped my passport and let me go, so I could continue my travels with John. So we made it all the way to Istanbul. Now he wanted to go to Greece, but Greece wouldn't give me a visa of any kind. So I had to go around. I went through Bulgaria and anyway, I made it to through Yugoslavia all the way to Belgrade, and then from there, I had agreed. John and I had agreed to meet up again in Zagreb, but I missed him by one day, so I guess he figured I was probably having more trouble, and he just kept going. So I eventually made it from Zagreb into Italy and then into Austria. And then when I got to the border between Austria and Germany, the Germans, when they saw my passport, they started laughing and they grabbed me by the arms and took me back to the Austrian border police, and they said, "Okay, you guys, you've just been suckered. This guy, you can keep him. We're not going to have anything to do with him." And the Austrians looked at my passport, world citizen passport, and they didn't know what to do. So after keeping me most of all morning and into early afternoon, they decided that they didn't want to deal with me. So they told me to get in their car, and they took me down a certain distance from the border, and they said, "Okay, you have Germany on at the top of the mountain, and make sure you make it into Germany because we don't want to see you again. If we see you again, we will throw you in jail. Okay?" And I said, "Okay, well, thank you very much." I made it over the mountain into Berchtesgaden in Germany. And since I had an address of an acquaintance in Munich, I went to Munich, spent a few days resting there. And then I went on through Germany into Switzerland, where Garry had his office in Basel. Or Basel, well, they actually have different names depending upon what language. Anyway, so I get to Garry's office, and there's this little note on the door saying, "We've moved," but there was a telephone number. So I wrote down the telephone number, and I went to the train station, and I made a call to the number that was posted on Garry's office, since they had moved. And I got Garry's wife, Esther, on the phone. And I said, I didn't know it was his wife, but anyway, I said, "My name's Will Reed. I'd like to speak to Garry Davis. I've been having some difficulty traveling with the world passport, and I just wanted if he could give me some advice and tell me where it's easy to travel and where, whatever." And she said, "What?" She said, "You came all the way from Bangkok to here on the world passport?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at the train station." She says, "Don't move. I'll come and get you." so, so
Good old Esther. We loved Esther so much. And of course, she's in our movie too. And she's just an incredible, vivacious, what a woman.
no, she she came. She drove up to the, the train station, and I told her what I looked like. I had a backpack and so forth. So she took my backpack, she put it in the trunk of her car, she covered it up with a blanket, but she came with her children, Christoph and Troy and yeah, Kim. I guess she left at home. Anyway, so we're in the car going back, leaving Switzerland, going into France. So in France, the immigration control, border police, they asked for everyone's papers. And so Esther gave, everyone provided their ID cards or whatever. And the guy's looking at it and says, "What about this gentleman in the back seat? I don't see his paperwork or his passport." And says, "Well, we were in such a hurry, he forgot to take his passport." And he said, "Okay, well, I'll let you go this time, but next time, if you don't have his passport, I'm gonna have to keep him here until you come back with his passport." And she said, "Okay, well, we're sorry, we'll be very careful next time." And he says, "Okay, go." There I am. I'm in France. But Garry wasn't home, and so anyway, she gave me something to eat, and so when Garry got home, it wasn't, well, it was kind of late. I think he showed up like about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And all I could read, he's screaming. He said, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is incredible." When he saw my passport with all those visa stamps. So he immediately called Jim Haynes, his representative in Paris, to organize a press conference or whatever you want to call it. And anyway, so Garry takes me to Paris, and the first thing he did was he took me to the UN office for the protection of refugees and stateless people, where I met the Aga Khan. And he said, "Well, we can give you a certificate that says you're either stateless or a political refugee, but I can't give you both." And I said, "Well, I'm stateless. You might as well give me a certificate that says I'm stateless, but I'm a world citizen." And he says, "Yeah, just like Garry." So anyway, I get a certificate that says I'm stateless, which allowed me to stay in France and eventually get a residence permit and a work permit. There I was, established in France.
Wow, what an incredible odyssey! And by the way, folks, all of this is detailed in your book, Pinballed, the story of a free-thinking, nonconformist, lifelong fight for what has always eluded him, a place to live and call home. So watch for that incredible book, and there's a GoFundMe. We'll tell you at the end where you can be part of getting that book finished and out there to the world. But before we go into that, in this point in your adventure, tell us more about your experiences with Garry there in Paris, and because you lived there. Well, that became your home. So tell us more about your experiences with
Right.
Garry.
Well, I arrived at Garry's house on I think it was the 18th of August, and Esther found me a job working on a fruit farm not far from where they were living in Ezang. But I was pretty isolated, and there was no social life. I mean, I had a roof over my head, and I could, enough to eat. So that was all right. But it was a very lonely kind of existence. And so after a few months, I told Esther's son Christoph, I said, I'd like to get out of here and go to Paris and continue my travels because I eventually planned on going to Canada. So Crystal said, okay, well, I'll take you to Paris. Okay, so I ended up in Paris at the end of 1972. And from there, I did get my resident permit and my work permit, and I started working in. Well, first of all, I was washing windows, and then I was working as a cook's helper, and then I was teaching English, and then after I'd been in Paris just over a year, I started a print shop with Jim Haynes, who was Garry's World Citizen Passport representative, and Jim had a whole box of world passports. So he was issuing these world passports to people who were asking for them, including Peter Fonda and a number of other people as well. And that got him into some trouble because the French were not very happy to see someone issuing world passports. I guess they were jealous. I don't know. But they confiscated all the passports that Jim had, all the world citizen passports, and they were charging Garry. They initially charged him with fraud, but they dropped the fraud charge. And then they just said, well, you're confusing the public.
And now, wait a minute. That's so interesting because when we were interviewing Garry, it turns out they charged him with it being a fraudulent passport. And he said, well, if it's a fraud, then it's a fraudulent copy of what passport? Well, there is no such thing. So I'm being charged with making a fraudulent copy I'm making a fraud of a copy of something that doesn't exist. And they said, well, okay, we're going to charge you with confusing the public.
So, and I did get to go to his second trial with his son Troy, and there were some notable people, L'Abbé Pierre and other people were defending Garry, and again he was deported. But I never really could understand how any country could deport a man when his wife and children were still in the country. I mean, in France. So Garry was deported from France for confusing the public.
Well, I would say that the nation state system is confusing the public, and Garry was the one who was telling the truth, and that's pretty darn confusing because we are really all one. It is really one world, and we are all citizens of one world, and all these nation state lines are all made up, and that's what's confusing the public. But in any case, in their mind, he was confusing the public for telling the truth. Now, it's very interesting. At that trial, there was very interesting testimony presented, including some direct quotes from Albert Einstein, who we opened the movie with. But basically, Garry Davis has grasped the only problem to which I myself am determined to devote the rest of my life, whether mankind, and he said, the very existence of mankind will disappear by its own hand, or whether it will continue to exist.
There were many famous people who came to Garry's defense. You had Max Ernst, you had Jean-Paul Sartre, a very well-known French intellectual. A whole ton of people came to his defense. And again, the French, they just, well, we don't know what to do with this guy, so just get him out of here.
We don't know what to do with this guy. That was sort of a common expression for Garry and for you. I mean, there you were when you're in Austria. We don't know what to do with this guy. Let's tell him to sneak in over the mountain. This is the official police giving you advice to break into a country. Anyway, because they don't know what to do with you. They're confused. They're confused by world citizenship. But anyway, do you remember any more details about that trial? Because that was such a fascinating trial to read about. What else do you remember about who was speaking, what they said, what
Oh,
impact it
yeah.
had?
I didn't record anything. I didn't write anything down. All I remember is uh, for me, it was some kind of a farce. You know, they didn't know what to do with Gary except get him out of here. We don't, this guy's a pain in the, you know what, get him out of here. And at one time, I printed the inside of the World Citizen passport for Gary. He showed up at night at the print shop. I printed up 1,000 copies of the inside. I didn't have the means to print the cover, but he was happy that I could print the inside, and then he was offered to make another 1,000 World Citizen passports. This is the one that had the sky blue cover, sky blue plastic cover.
Do you have, by any chance, have your world passport with you?
This is my 4th World Citizen passport. Okay. The French police were very fond of confiscating my first passport, and in the trial they didn't come up with it was supposed to be evidence of Gary's confusing the public, but they kept losing the passports. They confiscated mine 3 times, and 3 times they couldn't present it in the trial. I mean, this is incredible. And I said, they must really like it. I think they're framing it and putting it up in their homes or something, you know. It was just so that David just issued recently. This is my 4th World Citizen passport.
And have you tried have any visas in it yet? Any visas in the new one yet, or not yet?
I'm not going to give it to the police.
Okay. Very precious. Well, this is such an incredible journey of PINBALLED. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book and about your GoFundMe for people to help fund this getting this journey and this story out? And why did you call it PINBALLED, first of all?
Because I couldn't think of anything better. I mean, my whole life I've been bounced around and tilted and put in these traps and jailed and everything else. So, you know, it's just a title that came up, and I actually like the title, Pinball.
And you play pinball?
I used to.
Good. I love the title, PINBALLED. So a memoir. Tell us about the current stage of that memoir and how people might help promote it.
Well, you know, writing a book is one thing. I mean, but making it readable and then getting it printed, and you know, you need a graphic artist, a corrector, editor. I mean, it's just not something, unless you're extremely talented, you're not going to just write a book and it's perfect and you get it published. You can of course go through the Amazon process of doing your own book, which is nice. I did a couple like that, but it's all about marketing and distribution afterwards. I mean, the big publishing companies, whether it's Random House or Hachette, I mean, there are quite a few big publishers out there, but it takes a certain amount of money, you know, and if you want to do a quality book, if you want it well written, and I'm not a writer, far from it. I mean, I can give you a very detailed explanation of how to make concrete and how to pour it and how do you treat the subgrade before you pour your concrete. But that's not very literary, you know. So I found a gentleman, David Ferris, who's had some experience writing, ghost writing, editing, and so forth, and so he's helping me make Pinballed something readable, enjoyable, that people will have a certain amount of pleasure in reading it.
So the bottom line is you need people to help donate to this, right? Tell us about that.
Well, I put up my initial crowdfunding project is on Indiegogo. So anyone who goes on Indiegogo, they can look up Pinballed, and they will see the what we're trying to obtain. Also, I have well, when you go to the Indiegogo website, you'll see that I also have world citizen flags in various sizes. One you can put on the table to, your dinner table, and people will say, "Oh, what's that?" Oh, that's a world citizen flag. And also, so also on, I've made other flags and stickers, little stickers.
Go to that site and enjoy all those. I do want to get to the questions because we're running short on time, and I'm sure there are many wonderful questions. So go ahead, Melanie, take it to the questions.
Thank you so much, Arthur. And Will, what a story. What a story. Oh my gosh. What very scary moments. I mean, being in prison is just soul crushing, and you are strong and you survived, and thank you for sharing this with us. I mean, oh my gosh. So bravo to you. Bravo to you. Let me go to, we have David Gallup here. He's the president of the World Service Authority. Please go ahead, David. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Will, for sharing your amazing story. It's incredible. I guess my question focuses on how you've sort of survived as I don't like the word stateless. I like world full, but as a world full rather than stateless world citizen. And how's that impacted your day-to-day life even now? I mean, what was that journey like, recognizing your humanity?
Well, when I first arrived in France, I was very proud to. People were saying, "Oh, where are you from? What's your nationality?" And I was very, very proud to say, "Oh, I'm a world citizen." and I had my, the world passport. It was the sky blue version on the cover, and so everywhere I went, my student card, everywhere I went, I said, "Oh, I'm a world citizen," and people went, "Oh, yeah, wow. How did you become a world citizen?" I said, "I was born on the planet Earth."
Bravo.
Wow. So that perfect. So you're carrying on and telling everyone as you go along. That's terrific.
And Mike Zverin, he's already checked out, but when he put that article in the International Herald Tribune at the time, talking about Garry Davis being world citizen #1, and he said, it was titled "Will Reed World Citizen #2," and then at the end of his article, he said, "Who's going to be world citizen #3?"
Perfect. Oh my gosh. Oh, look at the time. We want to quickly go to Stefan. Stefan, can you jump in?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you very much for that interesting story. My goodness, quite a life for sure. Yeah, my question, being Canadian, at one point you said that you were going to be trying to get to Canada. So two questions. One, did you manage to get there or here, where I am? And why choose Canada? And I'm going to couch this a little bit because Canada has a kind of positive international reputation, which is being chipped away at, I think, and really, to a very large degree, not really living up to the reputation. Canada is not living up to the reputation that it has had. So I'm just wondering why you were thinking of Canada and if you made it.
Well, I did make it to Canada, but many, many, many years later. But I have to admit that thankfully there was a Canadian group that bought my ticket from Bangkok to New Delhi on the Aeroflot flight. And they said, well, whenever you can, if you can, pay us back. But since I didn't write anything down, I don't remember the name of this organization, but I sure would like to thank the Canadians for allowing me to get out of prison in Bangkok. But for me, it was I wanted to get to Canada because from Canada, I thought I would be able to somehow be able to continue my fight to regain my American citizenship. So today I have two citizenships. I'm now French American, but I will always be a world citizen first, then a French citizen, and last but not least, an American citizen.
Beautiful.
For voting purposes mainly.
Well, beautiful, beautiful. And Uzwem, I just want to see if you can unmute, just say hello real quick.
Really, really inspiring, I must say.
And wonderful. And thank you all for being here. And I want to do a special thank you to Will. Will, for your incredible life. And I can't wait for you to get your book out. Please, everyone go to that Indiegogo campaign and just type in PINBALLED and you will find it there. And let me just, one more thank you to you, Will. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's send it back to Arthur. Arthur, take it away.
Well, thank you, Will. That was an incredible odyssey and is an incredible odyssey. And, you know, it's so rare and special to have people who were part of Garry's journey from way back then. You know, Esther is his wife, and he have both passed away. But it's great to know that other people are still able to share the story and continue. And there were many who also joined in becoming, you know, world citizens. And I'm glad that you were able to get such good press about it and get now to tell this story to the world. I want to just say thank everybody for being here this week and every week on the People Powered Planet. We do have a program coming up next week, which is a club social, where Will, you're welcome to come back, and everybody else is welcome to join us, and we'll just all chat. We can all talk about some of these issues and about things we want to do. It's kind of an open time. We're coming up on June 19th, the day when we celebrate emancipation. We're going to talk about emancipation of all of us from the twin threats of nuclear war and environmental devastation, which could end life on Earth. And we have an incredible author, Timon Wallace, who wrote a book, Warheads to Windmills, Preventing Climate Catastrophe and Nuclear War. Well, join us in finding out that journey that humankind can take now to emancipate us from those twin threats. June 19th on the People Powered Planet podcast.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video.